I'm Margaret Talev.
And I'm Phil Mattingly, and with all due respect to Pope Francis, it would appear you're not the only one who really wanted to get out of Washington.
Zippity-doo down, zippity-ay. My, oh my, what a wonderful day.
On the show tonight, values and voters, but first, a soon-to-be vacancy. Today, in what happened to be a really slow news day, sort of, Speaker John Boehner said sayonara to Capitol Hill, announcing that he would resign from Congress at the end of October. Here's the reasoning that Boehner gave.
Before I went to sleep last night, I told my wife, I said, you know, I might just make an announcement tomorrow. Well, what do you mean? What kind of announcement? Well, I might just tell them it's time to go. So this morning I woke up and walked up to Starbucks as usual and got my coffee and came back and read and walked up to Pete's Diner and saw everybody at Pete's and got home and thought, yep, I think today's the day.
Gotta love the Pete's Diner reference. Now, Speaker Boehner, we had some good times. We laughed. We cried. We listened. We cried. Mr. Speaker, basically what I'm trying to say is that we cried a lot. Margaret, there were tears. It's been a big week for Speaker Boehner. Why is Speaker Boehner leaving now?
Well, Phil, Speaker Boehner wanted to leave a year ago by his own admission. And what happened was Eric Cantor, out of nowhere, well, in Eric Cantor's mind, out of nowhere, lost that seat. Boehner felt that he had to hang on. He said he made up his mind last night. I suspect he'd been thinking about this for a while. You saw him weeping when the Pope was with him just a day earlier. I think he was holding out for the Pope's visit, and after that, he had nothing left to prove to anybody. I
think there's a lot of truth to that. I think when you talk to people that are on his team or in kind of his network, yesterday was a peak for him. He'd worked for 2 decades to get the Pope to Washington. The Pope's there. He has this very personal moment with the Pope that he described during that press conference where the Pope asked John Boehner to pray for the Pope, and the impact that had on John Boehner. You saw it today. He's told the story over and over again, according to multiple people that I've talked to. I'm not saying the Pope's visit is the reason he resigned. I don't think that's the case, but I do think yesterday there was just this sense of almost calm, the sense that, okay, I've done it.
And it was never going to get any better than that.
That might have been peak, because you knew what was coming throughout the rest of the week.
That's absolutely right.
All right, reaction to Boehner's announcement was swift, and in many cases it was completely predictable, especially among 2016ers. Now, establishment types like Jeb Bush and John Kasich and Chris Christie, they complimented the Speaker. Outsider types like Donald Trump, Carly Fiorina, and Ted Cruz, well, they all welcomed the resignation. And at the Values Voter Summit in Washington, Marco Rubio got this reaction when he broke the Boehner news.
Just a few minutes ago, Speaker Boehner announced that he will be resigning.
That's still a little bit jarring. Meanwhile, someone who may look familiar to you just went ahead and pinned down the leader of the free world on the Speaker during a joint news conference at the White House today.
What is your reaction to House Speaker John Boehner's decision to resign?
Something I think John understood, even though at times it was challenging to bring his caucus along, that we can have significant differences on issues, but that doesn't mean you shut down the government. That doesn't mean you risk the full faith and credit of the United States. You don't invite potential financial crises.
That was, of course, Margaret Talev with the question, one of your patented 17-part questions to the President of the United States. So, Margaret, a shutdown, according to Republican lawmakers, looking exceedingly less likely, but a leadership fight is definitely coming. What happens next?
Well, on the leadership fight side, what happens next is we already know Kevin McCarthy, who's the majority leader, is kind of the most obvious conventional wisdom candidate. John Boehner essentially gave him his blessing. But you have others like Daniel Webster waiting in the wings, more conservative, who may think that Kevin McCarthy may be too close to the Boehner legacy. There are real questions about what's going to happen now in terms of raising the debt limit, many of the budget issues that President Obama has to contend with by the end of the year. And while Boehner had long been open to some kind of immigration reform, and Obama was frustrated that he wouldn't just go do it, McCarthy is really interesting because he's from California. He's not completely against immigration reform also, but he'll be very much in the crosshairs if he ascends the speakership and if he decides to go that route.
Yeah, no question about it. I think you talk to House aides right now, House lawmakers. Clearly, Kevin McCarthy just has the juice to be able to win a speakership battle. I think the bigger question right now becomes majority leader and whip, where there's going to be contests. And the bigger question is there's 35, 40 lawmakers who have always been the thorn in the side for Speaker John Boehner, who have always been the rabble-rousers that cause him so much problems. Okay, now's your opportunity. Let's see you back up what you've been doing. It's easy to throw bombs, and this is what you hear from Republican leadership aides all the time. It's easy to throw bombs from the backbench. Right. Let's see you organize and try and put somebody up. And so I think that's the big question for me right now is, can they coalesce around a single candidate, and who would that candidate be? All right, the real focus of the president's news conference today was, well, China. He was sitting there with President Xi Jinping. Primarily, it was a day for President Xi and Obama to tout cooperation on issues like climate and cybersecurity. Speaking of cyber issues, that pesky reporter Margaret Talev, the first question you asked both presidents was about just that. Now, you heard what they had to say. Do you think their agreement that they announced today on cyber actually has teeth?
It has some teeth in this sense. If the Chinese leader is agreeing with President Obama that governments are not going to be doing this to each other, then President Obama has some predicate to proceed with more sanctions and a tougher approach. But the big issue has been Chinese piracy and how it affects American business, and whether the Chinese government will prosecute those offenders in China and when. And that issue is obviously completely unresolved. The sanctions issue also unresolved. President Obama left the door open to that. But if he goes in that direction, would there be a retaliation by the Chinese? Chinese President Xi would not answer that question when we asked him today.
I think by far the most interesting part of this relationship is what President Obama hinted at today, that the two sides are talking about figuring out some type of international norms on cyber attacks, on hacking going forward. That doesn't exist, almost like an arms agreement right now. And I think there was some talk in the last 2 weeks. Chinese officials were meeting with the FBI director and intelligence officials 2 weeks ago, that maybe they could reach that at this meeting. That clearly didn't happen. They weren't even close to that. But the fact that those talks are going to continue are interesting. If they could ever reach that agreement, that would be transformative in kind of the national security intelligence arena. I just think they're so far away from that. And the idea, do you really think China's going to say, we have knowledge that there's been cyber attacks in the United States of America, and now we're going to tell you? I just don't.
We're out of the game.
I don't buy
Turning
it.
everything over.
I don't necessarily buy it. I'm pessimistic, even though it's Friday afternoon. All right. Hillary Clinton is sinking in New Hampshire. A new CNN WMUR poll puts Bernie Sanders at 46% and Clinton at 30%. Joe Biden gets 14%, and even if Biden weren't in the race, Sanders still leads Clinton. And as if that wasn't a bad enough headline, there's the new drip, drip, drip about Clinton's emails. Plus, reports that Draft Biden PAC has begun operations in 11 Super Tuesday states. Margaret, a lot of headlines here. This has been going on all week. It's been going on all campaign. Which one is the worst for Hillary Clinton?
So it's all bad, right? Yeah. Look, if she were the nominee, the email controversy, the latest in the email controversy, would be the worst. It's not even clear at this point that she's going to be the nominee, and that's her problem. So in this primary where it stands right now, the WMUR poll is the worst because it shows Bernie Sanders is a problem for her, and if Bernie Sanders is a problem for her, that may pave the way for Joe Biden to be a problem for her down the road. Which makes
Draft Biden's work right now on the outside all the more important. Double digits, even when you include the margin of error in a poll in New Hampshire, is jarring. I think it's jarring, but I would say, on the Clinton team's defense, what they're doing right now is really kind of letting her loose. Clinton letting loose, not necessarily things you put together, but they're starting to really take a page of the Obama team's campaign operations. She had the interview with Lena Dunham. She's been doing stuff with Mario Lopez. That works. That's how you kind of build an outside movement around you. You kind of start to address the grassroots, address people, areas where people have said she's had a problem, that there's been a disconnect before. And I think that her team is in a very early stage of releasing kind of their full-scale plan. And trying to turn the vote around, too. You saw with Keystone earlier this week, her trying to get in front of that so that she could be against it before Obama's against it, right? Absolutely. It's very early, and I think she had a good week on the policy side of things. Her team is very happy with what they did on the policy side of things. Still, this dominates every week, it seems, and I think that's got to be enormously frustrating to them. She's trying to turn things around, but the numbers have not caught up to her yet. At least not in New Hampshire. All right, more on the big news from John Boehner and more reaction from the White House after this.
I enjoy what I'm doing. Some days are more fun than others, I will say that. But I came here to fight a fight for a smaller, less costly, and more accountable government. I think that leaves more resources in the private sector, better jobs, better wages than this big government solution to everything that the people on the other side of the aisle want to fight. And so I'm engaged in that fight, and as long as I am, I'll be here.
It'll be 10 years, maybe.
No.
So less than 10?
Way less.
Less than 6?
Probably.
Less than 4?
No, let's not get into this. I'm not going to be here forever.
We're less than 6. So
well, let's put it this way. I told my staff about 5 years ago, if I'm 70 years old still walking around here, somebody just shoot me. All right? I'm not going to be one of these guys that dies in a cell.
Breaking news, nobody from Team Boehner will have to commit violence. Now, that was from Mark Halpern's conversation with John Boehner back in April about the Speaker's future. Now, our guest tonight is Doug Heye, who's the Deputy Chief of Staff for former Congressman Eric Cantor. Doug joins us from Harvard, where you can follow him on Twitter at Harvard Fellow Doug Heye. Doug.
That is a fake account, Phil. That is a fake account. That is not my account. So Twitter needs to verify my actual account at Doug Heye. Thank you for that.
We will start working on that as well. Doug, I want to get into a lot of legacy stuff with John Boehner. You were in the room,
sure.
The most intense meetings that you could possibly have during your time on the Hill. But first, I want to ask you to kind of take a look at what's going to happen over the next 30 days. You know this conference very, very well.
Yeah.
At the start of November, who's the Speaker, who's the leader, and who's the majority whip as it stands right now?
Well, that's a whole lot that's going on right now. And certainly it looks like Kevin McCarthy has really jumped out in front. And what he's doing and his team's doing, I think, is very smart. He's talking about being a unifier. And if there's one thing we've seen over the past 18 hours, if not 18 months, is that the Congress needs somebody, certainly the House Republican Conference, needs somebody who's going to unify them. And that's something that Kevin McCarthy has shown a real, not only willingness, but ability to do in some tough jobs. As majority leader, I thought he's done a really good job. And being the whip is probably the toughest job for House Republicans right now. And he worked his tail off in that job and really tried to bring different parts of the party together on different issues, sometimes successful, sometimes not. Majority Leader Cantor would get involved. The Speaker would get involved sometimes on really tough issues. But Kevin's somebody who worked tremendously throughout that process. And I think he's got the inside track on this. We'll see his vote counting abilities when he wins as Speaker. And hopefully we'll unify the party. Now, where else are we? Majority Leader and Whip? I think those are going to be tough to tell. We're going to see who jumps in and who tries to move up the ladder. And there's going to be a lot of, I think, rancor in some of these fights. And some you may not see as intensified as possible. And it's really tough to predict who will emerge victorious. But there'll be a lot of players going in.
But, Doug, when we talk about unifying the party, that's one thing. What about the really dysfunctional dynamic between the congressional Republicans and this White House? There is still a year plus left of President Obama's term. Is there anything that a new speaker can do to change that dynamic? Do you think that's likely at all?
No, I think that's going to be a major part of the dynamic. And I go back to, the sound that you played earlier from the Value Voter Summit. If you're happy that John Boehner's gone, well, then what's the alternative? And I don't mean what's the alternative as to what Republican, but what fight do you then want to have? I'd like to see Republicans unified in a message going against Senate Democrats, certainly when they were in the majority and we had trouble doing that, House Democrats, and ultimately President Obama. If we end up fighting amongst ourselves the whole time, which we've certainly done a lot of over the past couple of years, then we really limit our ability to do anything with Democrats. And for me, that goes back to December of 2012 when, as you'll remember, Margaret and Phil, we worked on something that we called Plan B to deal with, what a great name, Plan B, something to push back on the Democrats when the Bush tax cuts were expiring. And what we saw was there were enough Republicans who were nervous enough about voting what they defined as being a tax increase, because this was a vote that would happen on December, say, 27th or 28th, instead of January 1st, when the taxes actually definitely would rise. So taxes are higher today because some Republicans didn't want to vote for what they perceived as a tax increase. And what we saw was, instead of throwing sand, as some people described it, a lot of Democrats would describe it to me, at Harry Reid or the Obama administration, we showed that we couldn't pick up the sand and we couldn't throw the sand. And ultimately, that's why Republicans have had some of the problems that they've had over the past couple of years. It's why we need to unify and march together. And if we're not able to do that, we'll have these same problems.
Doug Heye, folks, his actual Twitter account is at Doug Heye. You should definitely follow him. He's got a ton of great insight and also a ton of great stories about the Speaker. Don't follow the other guy. Thank you very much, Doug, from Harvard. We will be right back with a look at President Obama's crazy week with somebody who's in the room for every minute of it. Brian Deese, the unanimous Bloomberg Politics choice for best beard in the West Wing and senior advisor to the president overseeing climate and the energy portfolio. I want to welcome you to the show. Obviously, some busy times over there, but a big announcement today in the meeting between President Obama and President Xi. This is the second meeting in as many years where there's been a big climate announcement at the end of the meeting or during the meeting. I know you've been deeply involved in that, but I guess my question is, China commits to having a national cap-and-trade system by 2017. I don't think there's any chance the U.S. is going to be able to follow suit just based on the facts on the ground. Is the U.S., in your eyes, kind of a hindrance to some of the momentum heading into Paris?
Oh, absolutely not. I think it's, in fact, the opposite. I think what you're seeing today is the result of when the United States actually steps up and leads on an issue, other countries around the world, including China, lead as well. I think you guys are familiar with the Clean Power Plan that the president announced just a little over a month ago, and that's the single largest step that any president has taken on climate, and it will cap emissions in our domestic power sector. What you saw today was China laid out its approach to its domestic power sector and other sectors of its economy. And I think that part of the reason why you're seeing China move forward is their confidence that the United States is leading and the United States is committed to hitting the goals we've set out as well.
One other thing on this, I think, the idea has been, or at least when we were in Beijing in November, that China coming along with this would drag India along, would drag other countries along. Do you sense going into Paris that kind of the united front on some level between the U.S. and China is going to lead to a big international agreement, and kind of how do you handicap what we're going to see in December?
Well, look, the announcement between the U.S. and China last November was a big breakthrough. And since that time, we've seen countries that represent about 75% of global emissions put forward their post-2020 targets. So we've made a lot of progress. There are still some countries, you mentioned India, and others that I expect will put forward their emissions targets later this year in the run-up to Paris. But we've seen a lot of progress. That said, we still have a ways to go, and part of what this announcement today between the U.S. and China was about was trying to further lay the groundwork between our two countries to say where are our areas of commonality and how do we see an agreement actually taking shape. And so I think the announcement today is another important step. We got a lot of work yet to do, but I think we have a solid foundation to work from.
Well, Brian, you've been part of President Obama's team from the start, and as such, you've spent a lot of time dealing with budget issues, and you know as well as anyone that even though House Speaker John Boehner is on the other side of the ideological spectrum, he's been someone who the president has seen as a pretty straight shooter. What is his departure now going to do in terms of the president's ability to get things done, whether it's, let's say, cap and trade or any policy that involves, major U.S. policy, domestic policy?
Well, look, for starters, I would say the president spoke about Speaker Boehner earlier today, and I would just echo that he's an honorable man and somebody who has served his country in an honorable way. And one of the things about John Boehner is that while we disagree on issues across the board, he also understands that we do need to compromise. We do need to find common ground, and that's particularly true when it comes to issues that affect our economy. And so, we will see what happens in the House and see what happens in terms of their changes to the leadership structure. But certainly our hope and our expectation that as we move forward, the party and its leadership will recognize the importance of not playing games that would put our economic recovery at risk. Having the Chinese here and seeing, the final second quarter GDP numbers today just only reinforces that the United States economy is showing continued durable growth, and the last thing we can afford right now is self-inflicted wounds. So we hope that we will have partners in Congress that will understand that and reflect that going forward.
Brian, a lot of serious issues on the table, obviously, when you're meeting with Chinese officials, but we are a politics show, and we just have to ask the question, when you're sitting behind closed doors in these negotiations, hard negotiations, late at night, do they ever ask what the heck is up with Donald Trump?
You know, I haven't had those conversations, which is not to say that they've never taken place. You know, look, I will say that the climate announcement that we put forward today was the result of a lot of hard work over the last several months. And one of the things that I think is positive about our relationship is that having identified our two countries' commitment to lead on this issue, we now do have a very strong relationship. We don't agree on everything. The negotiations are very hard and very tough, but we have channels that we can make real progress with, and I think that the announcement today is a reflection of that. But we'll see whether we have more domestic politics conversations with them going forward.
Brian Deese, we know that you have to go soon because you have a state dinner to get ready for and some tuxedo pants to pick up. Is that right? Other than getting your outfit ready, can you talk to us a little bit about what it's like to attend a state dinner, what you're looking the most forward to tonight, and is there one etiquette faux pas you try to avoid as you think ahead to the night?
Well, first things first, you want to have a tuxedo before you go. So I'm going to go pick mine up now. But look, they're extraordinary opportunities, and I'm very fortunate to get to attend. Last time I took my mom, and that was quite a trip. But this time, my wife and I will be attending.
I know things have been really crazy over there, so we really appreciate you taking the time. Good luck at the dinner tonight. No major faux pas, and please no international incidents. Brian Deese, Senior Advisor to the President of the United States, thank you very much. And we'll be right back with kind of a tribute to John Boehner. It is Friday, and it is time to close up shop. But before you start your weekend, let's relive some of the great John Boehner moments from his time as Speaker of the House.
Are you kidding me? Hell no, you can't! Put something on the table. They have to try to keep 218 frogs in a wheelbarrow. Get off their ass and do something. Zippity-doo-dah, zippity-doo. My, what a wonderful day.
It's the frogs in the wheelbarrow that kind of gets me on that one. Look, the man loved his wine. He loved his cigarettes.
Golf.
He actually loves golf probably more than anything in the world. But my favorite thing ever is his fashion critiques, which never stop if you're in the speaker's lobby. Your tie has to be a certain length. It has to be formed in a specific way. In fact, on Bloomberg Television, he forced Peter Cook to re-tie his tie during an interview. Mr. Speaker, we are most certainly going to miss you. Have a great weekend, everybody. Mark and John are back next week. Until then, for Margaret, Talev, Phil Mattingly, sayonara.
Sayonara.